know that from the inception of EFCC, even though it has a wide jurisdiction and scope in terms of fighting financial crimes, but majority of the work that EFCC had embarked on or had been doing over the years are work that relates to the investigation of former governors. Investigation can also include an incumbent, but for the investigation plus prosecution of former governors. And this is where the EFCC has had a hurdle from 1999 till today.
This channel not only feed your eyes with good movies, we also bring you the hottest and the newest trend around the globe. My darlings, sit tight and enjoy this one.
Welcome back. The very first conversation we'll be having has to do with the state of the nation, but in focus will be the issue of the courts and the relationship between our anti-graft agencies and the state government. So later today we expect to have a hearing at the Supreme Court, and it has to do with the EFCC being questioned of their establishment or existence as 16 state governments or 16 states led by Kogi state government, which was the original, they originated as suits and took them to the Supreme Court to say, look, even this EFCC, let's look at it again. It was not established according to the provision of the Constitution, citing sections like Section 12 of the Constitution. And the other states now decided to join in the case. So there are different layers to this conversation, from the legal angle to the moral angle to even the political angle. And that's why we have joining us on the program a lawyer and a governance expert as well, Mr. Daniel Bwala. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Bwala, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Great to see you again. We're going to walk around a couple of them, but let's begin with this issue of the EFCC without trying to be preemptive of the biggest court in the land and trying to, extrapolate what the merits of the case are and how the outcome will be. But at the end of the day, this is a case in our hand, and it's a big question as to how this will play out in court. But maybe I'll have just to have your first impression as to how we got here, that we're now seeing a situation, because some people have said, look, it's good to challenge the process, no matter what it is. It's good to test the law and see how it plays out in court, especially the highest court in the land. What do you see as far as this particular case is concerned?
Right. Thank you for having me, and good morning to your viewers. Yes, you're right that the law is meant to be tested, and the law is developed. Like those who have that knowledge of jurisprudence of law, they will tell you that the law is developed by testing the law. It is when you test the law that you get the flexibility of the law that reflects on the intention of the lawmakers. And in some cases where the intention is not very clear, you will see the clarity by virtue of judicial pronouncement. And at other times, even if the intention of the lawmaker is in a certain direction, but maybe there have been change of customs, traditions, and the changing times. So when the law is tested, judicial pronouncement sometimes can give a new dimension to the law in order to meet with the quoting age of event. So that's about it. But now with respect to the, the merit and demerit of the matter, I don't want to delve into it because the matter is already before our judicial heaven. Supreme Court is called judicial heaven because the decision of that court binds all authorities throughout the Federal Republic. But you rightly asked the question which takes us away from the talking about the merit or demerit, which has to do with how we come here. You see, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission was created out of the police. And the police has the blessing of the law and the Constitution. And so there used to be a department in the police that deals with fraud. And that department, although has not been scrapped, but it is from that dimension that EFCC was created out of that police into an agency to operate specifically for specific function, which is economic and financial crimes. And so generally speaking, EFCC does not operate on its own and is not standing as though it is a self-created agency. It is an offshoot of the Nigerian police. And you must know that the Nigerian police is the mother of all law enforcement in the country. Even the Nigerian army came out of the police. If you remember the native authorities then, the Department of State Services came out of the police. ICPC came out of the police. All of them came out of the police. So EFCC can best be described as an offshoot of the police, enjoys the blessings of the law. The National Assembly, by virtue of the provision of Section 4, it says they have powers to make laws for good, for peace, order, and good government. Peace, order, and good government. So sometimes when the law is tested, especially with specific reference to the enactment of the National Assembly, it is to see whether the law that is made provides peace, whether it provides order, or whether it provides good government. This is the yardstick, the acid test for the legitimacy, legality of the powers of the lawmakers to make laws for the country. And so there is no limitation as to the law that the National Assembly can make, except if the Constitution provides that such a law or enactment is to be made by a body other than the National Assembly. But of course, you know that all laws of the Federation are to be enacted by the lawmaking arm of the government. So that's the foundation. Then the governors. You know that from the inception of EFCC, even though it has a wide jurisdiction and scope in terms of fighting financial crimes, but majority of the work that EFCC had embarked on or had been doing over the years are work that relates to the investigation of former governors. Investigation can also include an incumbent, but for the investigation plus prosecution of former governors. And this is where the EFCC has had a hurdle from 1999 till today. They have found convictions in almost all other cases without stress, but when it comes to the governors, there have always been one delay or the other, one frustration or the other. And it is still the extension of that fight between the governors and the EFCC that is leading to the unlawful, illegal, and mischievous plan to scrap the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission.
Well, interesting, Mr. Bwala, and that was where I was going to head to. The position of the EFCC, that this is particularly having to do with the fact that it is the haunted that has instituted this suit. But you've covered that already. But in challenging this position, Mr. Femi Falana has, caused us to begin to think about, the law being a breach of true federalism. That's the establishment of true federalism. But he said something quite instructive, that if the law establishing the FCC is a breach of true federalism, then it is the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria itself that supports this breach of true federalism. And that should even cause us to reflect about other aspects of our laws. We could think about taxation, which some of the governors have challenged in recent past. We could even think about local government autonomy, which the federal government has had to by itself institute a case in court which saw a ruling in its favor. What are your reflections on this matter of federalism that is at the heart of the challenge to the EFCC's existence?
I do not think, quite frankly, with all honesty, that the functions and operations of EFCC has in any way invalidate or underestimate the powers of the federating unit to carry out functions or investigations and prosecution of individuals within the precincts of the state. It's a matter of interpretation and conflict of interest. Because, for example, in Kano, they have the anti-corruption body, which has been functioning optimally. And in Kano, you will see them functioning in specific areas that affect the economy of the state, Kano State. But you see, this idea that because Lagos State and few other states enact a law to fight corruption in their respective states, therefore, the functions of EFCC conflict with that, in my view, needs to be looked at, right? Without prejudice to the judgment of the court that talks about the Lagos State as being different from the federal. You see, because if you look at America, which is where most of our adaptations come from, you have the feds, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. You also have respective states that have their local policing and local fraud units and local anti-corruption bodies. But because of the specificity of the functions between the FBI and the local, there are certain crimes that have one concurrent jurisdiction between both the states and the feds, the FBI. So either the state can challenge and prosecute it, or the Federal Bureau of Investigation can as well do that. But in defining the scope and limitations of their powers, even if a state is undertaking prosecution of a case in the United States of America, the minute the FBI takes interest in that case, the FBI takes over the matter. And there has not been conflict in the US. That is the same thing that you find in Section 172 or 75 of the powers of the Attorney General to either institute, to take over, or to discontinue a case. That exercise of power has not prejudiced the interests of other bodies such as EFCC, police, or any other law enforcement within the federal government. So, for example, if EFCC is prosecuting a case in court, to which they have powers and jurisdiction to do that, Attorney General can come and take over that matter by just filing a appeal to the court. Or he can take over and then discontinue the matter. An Attorney General's office can as well institute a case for which EFCC has jurisdiction to also institute. But where the scope, powers, and limitation comes from is that the minute the federal government takes interest over that case, the federal government takes over that case. And the rationale behind that is this: the states will hardly prosecute case that affects the economy of the country. All federating units are components that put together that forms the state. Now, even though we practice federal system of government where there should be the powers of the state and the federation, if you look at Section 252 or 255, 252, I can't remember at the moment, talks about the exclusive and concurrent jurisdiction. So if you make the case that EFCC prosecuting a matter relating to a state amounts to breaching the independence of that respective state. So what do you talk about concurrent powers as contained in the Constitution, where both the state and the federal government can as well be involved in it? There are procedures, there are items in the concurrent list, right? Concurrent legislative list that either the state or the federal government can be involved in it. So I think that people have given interpretation to suit probably their narrative or that the best they can think about. But there is no conflict, as it were, as to the existence of Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and EFCC taking over or instituting a case relating to either a governor or a commissioner. This thing that you are seeing trying to scrap EFCC, the governors don't want EFCC to interfere with them. The state will naturally not prosecute the governors because a governor going out brings out somebody to take over from him. The one who comes to take over can prosecute his master. And so the minute we do not get the spirit and the motive behind this drive to scrap EFCC, then we will know exactly what they are up and about. Majority of the anti-corruption in Nigeria, the financial crimes in Nigeria, are perpetrated by governors, the federating unit. I will give you a classic case, Bukola. The president came and there was increase of allocation to the state when we began with the removal of subsidy. Now, think about it. Only in palliative, states got 5 billion, only in palliative. Now, with increased allocation, some states got nearly 100%. And these monies that have been coming to the state, apart from other interventions, have not been trickling down on the citizens of the state. The citizens are the citizens of the country. And if a governor is lucky to stay for 4 years or 8 years, he's likely to continue in that trajectory. By the time he finishes, the commonwealth of that state has been taken away. So they are saying if EFCC is not established, if EFCC is not functioning, then that means whatever the governor may have allegedly appropriated to himself when he goes with that. Do we have a country? If you take away in fact, I am for the strengthening of the EFCC and increasing the scope of its powers. But the reason why this conversation is happening at the moment, Buki, I have to be very honest with you, is because lately the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission is becoming weak every day. So that's why you see, they say when an animal acts like it is weak, even the flies will try to test on your patience. That is what is happening. Where people escape from the pranks of EFCC, where thorough investigation is not done, where accusation of members of EFCC collecting bribe, appropriating. Look at the case of Bobrisky. It has not been dealt with by EFCC. All of these things give rise to people saying that if EFCC is not even functioning at all. So there is need for a reform in EFCC, and the reform to be carried out in EFCC should not be initiated by EFCC. It can be a reform by the Act of National Assembly, or the executive branch of government can engage the Attorney General to introduce a reform, because no doubt EFCC is getting weaker and weaker by the day. That's the reason why people are raising this conversation.
So there's also, you stated the political and moral angle, which I mentioned at the very, very beginning. But if we stay with the law, is there merit in their own argument as to, because it looks like what you're saying is, on one hand, there's the argument over jurisdiction. You're the federal government, the state government, we are a federating unit. So you should respect that dichotomy. On the other hand, there's also the argument of, if you have to adopt anything that is covering all of us as a federating unit, follow the law. So where do you stand on this one?
So, like I said, if you want to understand true federalism within the context of our 1999 Constitution and its functionality in our present-day realities, is to look at the exclusive list and to look at the concurrent list. So, for example, if a crime, financial or economic crime, is committed by a governor or any citizen of the country in relation to matters that are within the exclusive list, the EFCC, without stress, will prosecute the matter, because the EFCC is an agency of the federal government which carries out the function of the federal government that are exclusively provided for in the exclusive list. Then there are matters also of economic crime that will engage an item or relate to an item that is in the concurrent. And items in the concurrent are items that state can do, federal government can do, they can do jointly. And in the given scenario, the state can prosecute, EFCC can prosecute. But in terms of knowing scope and limitation, within the framework of the Constitution is that the federating unit are not above the federal government, right? And it is not a country of its own. Meaning that even our law, this present Constitution, as weak as it is, and with the judgment of the Supreme Court relating to scope and limitation of state and the federal government, is that the minute the federal government takes over interest of a matter that is in the concurrent, the state will have to back off. So, for example, if Borno State is prosecuting a case of economic or financial crimes, now, even if it is allocation that comes from the federal government to that state, you cannot say the money is from the state. It's not an IGR of the state.
You're watching Nolly Magic TV. My joy is to keep you updated with latest gist. And your joy should be subscribing to this channel and giving this video a thumbs up, please.
It's allocation from the federal government. Any crime that is perpetrated arising from that money gives jurisdiction to the EFCC to prosecute the matter. You cannot say because the state is a federating unit, therefore EFCC should not exercise its powers in prosecuting such an individual. And that is one case scenario. There are virtually 80 to 90% of what the state enjoys comes under concurrency. And these states are busy trying to stop the EFCC from looking into their affairs. Meanwhile, they are also busy trying to stop the federal government from implementing that true federalism they are talking about that relates to local government. So in the case of local government autonomy, they will challenge it and say that the federal government is a meddlesome interloper, interfering on matters between them and the local government. Then when it comes to the federal government, they say leave us alone. So in other words, the attempt of the federating units in this country is to try to project itself as if it is an entity, a nation state, within the framework of the nation state. So you see that this is not workable. And these things are not rocket science. Like I said, you can assess that, or you can judge that by looking at the provisions of the Constitution relating to matters for which the federal government has exclusive jurisdiction or the federal government has concurrent. Even within the judicial framework, there are items, right, in the Constitution that the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. It means that you can approach the Supreme Court straight as a court of first instance, first and final. Then there are matters that the Supreme Court has appellate jurisdiction. That means that to start somewhere and then it comes to them for final determination. Then there are matters that the Supreme Court can provide policy in respect of the matter. This is order. In the same way we have that order in the executive branch of government, we also have in the legislative branch of government, where the National Assembly can legislate on a matter, the State House of Assembly can legislate on a matter. And I give you another case scenario of conflict, where there is a problem in a state relating to the State Assembly. Why is it that the provision of the Constitution provide that the National Assembly can declare state of emergency? The National Assembly can go to that state and legislate on behalf of that state, pending when the conflicts will be resolved. So there is no conflict as to the power of the faiths over and above the federating unit. And why is it that many items for which ordinarily would have benefited the citizens of state, for which state government have not taken to heart to challenge the federal government. What they are challenging the federal government at the moment are matters of corruption and anti-corruption. See, the governors in Nigeria, they are making concerted effort to destroy this democracy. I have said when President Tinubu started, when these allocations started moving, when nobody was looking at the responsibility of the federating unit in administering governance, when all pressures were pushed and directed at President Tinubu, I said that we have taken our minds and attention from the fact that this allocation we are talking about, majority of this allocation goes to state, and the development is at the state level and local level, and nobody cares to look at governors and probe them on their affairs. Do you know today, any protest that is conducted, it is not directed at governors. They are the majority of what constitute our governors in the framework of today. Even the media houses, it is a challenge that all of us have to rise to it, Buki. Before I come back to you, you will see that because states, they have retainership with media houses in terms of advert and the rest, they make all effort to make sure that even in media houses, there is no concerted effort in bringing to light conversation around whether or not the governors are administering the resources that is going to them. If the governors are doing half, I'm not saying full, half, nobody will be pointing at the federal government. The federal government will focus on matters of exclusive.
There's so many lessons to this subject matter, and you have hit the nail on the head in your response to some of these questions. There's the matter of jurisdiction, as you've rightly pointed out. There's morality, and maybe even the multiplicity of functions, because this is not the first time that the legitimacy of the EFCC has been challenged. And if indeed, the EFCC is becoming weak, as you say, it is under this administration that it is happening, the APC government. And, we could go on and on. But maybe we should move on to another matter that is equally, affecting the polity. This time around, Mr. Bola, is that matter between the DSS and SERAP. SERAP has written to the president and was very frontal, asking the president to stop using state security agencies, to weaponize opposition to dissent. And it's talked about its role in, challenging issues of national importance under past governments. But this is the first time that it is being intimidated. That's according to the statement that SERAP issued. It is surprising to note, Mr. Boala, that the SERAP hasn't, it has stood by what it said before the DSS instituted that suit, that its offices was raided in Abuja. Are you surprised by this development, Mr. Boala, that SERAP is not saying that no, it's not going back on its claim that its offices were raided?
Where the veracity or otherwise of what SERAP is claiming will be determined by court by the time the Department of State Services states its case before the court as to whether it has been defamed or not. But you know that SERAP should know, unlike every other civil society, that there is a difference, just like the way SERAP do not want interference in the functionality of their objectives, that law enforcement also have laws that is established and govern their operation. EFCC, DSS, for example, is an intelligence agency that is created to detect and prevent crime within the state. And the prevention and detection of crime, they carry it out through various capacities that they have, which includes intelligence collection. It includes operations that they needed to carry out to stop crime. So therefore, I lay this background to say that DSS has a right in the day or in the night to invade any place in the country if the intelligence they gather suggests that they needed to act swiftly. But the good thing about democracy within our constitutional framework is that the exercise of that power can always be checked by the law court, not by inciting the public. You see, because SERAP, if it felt that DSS intimidated it, the Constitution provides that if you feel that your right is violated, is about to be violated, or you think it's about to be violated, you can approach the court and seek for the enforcement. SERAP ordinarily would have approached the court and seek for the enforcement of their right. But SERAP is coming out to the public in order to incite the public against the DSS. That is where they got it wrong. They are not applying what the Constitution provided about the exercise of their right. So the Constitution provides for a way by means the executive powers can always be checked. And if DSS acted illegally, unlawfully, or outside the bounds of its jurisdiction, that setup can get from the court a judgment against the DSS. In this country, Buki, there have been judgments obtained by Nigerian citizens against law enforcement, against government at the state or federal level with large sums of money. That is democracy. But if you look at the checkered history of Sarah, and I'm saying that because there are other media and civil society organizations that develop and demonstrate that. The fact that you're a civil society does not mean you have unlimited scope, including that of undermining the security of the state. Now, Sarah has filed so many suits in the last probably 10 years, I can't remember specifically, throughout the government of President Buhari. Sarah is always the one in court. How many cases have they won? How many cases have the court said that it's frivolous that Sarah has done? The fact that you're a civil society does not mean everything you do is right. And let me tell you another dimension that makes us, and especially even the Department of Services, to look at the functions and operations of some of this civil society and look at it critically. There is this thing called national security interest. Most of this, and I'm not saying maybe it has to do with Sarah, most of these non-governmental organizations are funded outside of Nigeria. Some of them don't even know who are their original funders. They only know the middlemen between them. So I give you an example. Any body or name in the United States or United Kingdom can be said to be financing a non-governmental organization in order to push human rights. But you don't know who is financing the people financing you. And sometimes that is an objective they carry out. This is how all over the world there are foreign interference in the affairs of the state. Now, we the masses may look at it from the face value, but DSS power is to look between the lines, to look beyond you, and to see whether or not somebody is behind you trying to undermine the state. But the powers of the...
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Interesting conversation there.
I wanted to follow up on some of the things. Is because it's the case when cases are in court and subject of adjudication, try to be careful around what we comment on. Mr. Boala, I understand you, but maybe you land on your thought because I have a follow-up question for you. For a moment, we had a connection.
Right. So
yeah.
Okay. So I was saying that, like in America, they have what they call FISA, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and they have the FISA Court. The establishment of the court is to test the exercise of powers of the FBI and other intelligence organizations in the U.S. so that if they exercise their powers arbitrarily in tapping your information or breaching your privacy as a U.S. citizen, the court can always exercise its powers against them. I'm saying that to bring to home the notion that if you think that there are executive powers, whether police or DSS, there is a court to check the power and there is a court to award damages against them. But you cannot go against the law enforcement and say they can't perform their duties.
Mr. Boala, for the benefit of our audience, because I'm careful around the case because it's still is subject of adjudication. I don't know whether it's been heard. For the benefit of our audience, it's an argument between SERAP and the DSS, and it's neither here nor there. Why do I say that? It's your word against mine. DSS had claimed, from what I read, that they went to more like a familiarization visit to maybe new establishment within the city. That's what they said they went for. Not like invading the place. That's their own claim on one hand. And they went to that office. I'm saying this for the benefit of our audience who are not familiar with the story, so that you can also help us contextualize it as much as possible. They went there. They have a routine of establishment coming. As you said, they have a levels of power. So they call it maybe relationship with the leadership of that establishment. And they went to SERAP. And they said they didn't see anyone. I think they saw a certain person. The person said, look, nobody's in the office. If you have to come, you should have written to us, or at least write to us that you're coming so that we know you are coming. That was the argument. And then they said, okay, no problem. They left. That's the DSS claim. They left. And they found out that the SERAP, according to them, had posted on social media that their offices were invaded. So I want you to look at the picture I just painted here without trying to be the court. Shouldn't the DSS have written to SERAP to say, look, we just want to come and familiarize? Because at the end of the day, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are now, because there are claims as a fact that because of this crisis or imbroglio, at the end of the day, the reputation of our personnel is called to question, and by extension, the reputation of the DSS, which is the core of the argument.
Yeah. So if you look at the fact pattern, you will see that one, there is no violation of the human right in the sense of saying anybody in SERAP or at SERAP office was either manhandled, was abused verbally, or was intimidated. Now, DSS by law can come to your house whether by writing or by calling you or without any of these two invitations, because the law establishing them empowers them to carry out this act for the purposes of detection.
Mr. Bola, my apologies. My apologies, Mr. Bola. My apologies. I'm not trying to be ahead of the court. I just wanted to tell the story so you can help us. They say it's a familiarization. If you're going for a familiarization, shouldn't you have written?
I want to stand by what I said. I have not delved on the merit of the case in court. I have not mentioned anything relating to the suit. I am telling you what the law established to support DSS asks them to do or empowers them to do. And I'm also telling you what you will do as a person that will amount to violation of somebody's fundamental right. DSS does not have to write you, does not have to call you. They can just appear in your... Take, for example, if there is an exhibit that is a crime that they have, based on their intelligence and investigation, discover, and the minute they write you, you will move the exhibit away from there. The minute they call you, you will probably move the exhibit. I'm not saying it exists, but I'm just giving you one of the reasons why they may not have to do all this conventional prelude. They can just appear in front of your house. What is important in the eyes of the law is, when you finally appear in my house and I open the door and you say you want to familiarize, what is your conduct at that time? Can your conduct be interpreted as intimidating? Because the word intimidation, you can't just open your mouth and say intimidation and you think that because you say intimidation, it amounted to intimidation. Then where SERAP got it wrong, like I said, is that if somebody comes to you and you think that the person intimidated you, the law says you are to approach the court. You are not to incite the public. The tweeting of that is to incite the public against the Department of State Services. Now, if Department of State Services feels that we came, you didn't tell us you were annoyed, we asked for individuals, you told us they are not around, but you notify them, and you didn't give any signs that you feel by knocking at your door amounted to intimidation, the next thing I see, you put it on tweet in order to move public perception against me, and it has defamed me. If I feel so, I have the right to go to court. In fact, in this case, let me tell you, Mr. Geoffrey, DSS is the one that acted more professional than SERAP. Why? Because DSS could have just gone to their office and say, why did you tweet this? Come and explain. But the leadership of DSS now is doing what ought to be done, which is that even DSS is not too powerful or too much not to approach the court if it feels that its right is violated, rather than going there to bully people. So there is even a new order that supports constitutional democracy and free speech within the framework of the law that is being carried out by DSS by approaching the court.
Oh dear. So that's why they say technology sometimes is not a silver bullet. I just wanted Mr. Bola to, I would have loved him to land on his thought, but apparently technology is not allowing that for a moment. But if we, okay, Mr. Bola, just land on your thought. Just again, we had that issue. We have just about 1 minute. If you can wrap up.
For example, this technology that has taken me off, for which you have not heard what I said, does it amount to intimidation of my person? Does it amount to violation of my right to reply to your question? It is technology. So I need to look at it from that point of view and say, oh, this point I'm making is very strong, but unfortunately technology, intervened. DSS by law can write you, can call you on phone, can also appear with anything that they do. You can always approach the court and determine whether they did it with ill motive, they did it with intention to defame you or intimidate you, or they did it based on intelligence. I am saying that the current leadership of DSS is doing the right thing. That
Okay, Mr. Daniel Bwala, almost thank you. Well, technology did it again, but I'm not going to take it up, or you shouldn't take it up against me at the end of the day. But almost thank you for your perspective. I wanted to talk to you about the economy, but we understand we don't have much time anymore. Mr. Daniel Bwala is a lawyer as well as a governance policy analyst. I also call him the friend of President Bola Tinubu. Thank you so much, sir. If you can hear me, thank you so much for coming on the program. We appreciate it. Well, we will take a quick break. After this, we'll bring that conversation about the federal government has said it will, bring to zero import duty on certain goods for the cost of the crunch in the economy, the level of hardship people are facing, and some of these things are imported. But how far has that been? What's the level of implementation? Why do we still have things as expensive as they are? Those are the questions we'll be putting to our guests. Join us again.
Thank you for having stayed to the end of this video. You made me really happy. One more thing, click on the notification bell